Ask people what the biggest wrestling event ever is, and you'll probably get a bunch of different answers. WrestleMania 3 at the Pontiac Silverdome, for example. Or maybe something in Japan, a New Japan Tokyo Dome show. Could it be something from the turn of the last century even, from the days of Gotch, Hackenschmidt and Farmer Burns? And of course, if you asked Captain Lou Albano, he'd undoubtedly tell you that Heroes of Wrestling was the biggest wrestling event of all time. All of these answers are wrong. The biggest wrestling event ever took place on April 28th and 29th, 1995, and was attended by over 350,000 people over 2 days. And it happened in the largest stadium in the world, the May Day Stadium in Pyongyang, North Korea. Those 2 days saw a group of talented individuals, mostly WCW and New Japan wrestlers, wrestle in front of a crowd where, if you looked up from the ring, the folks in the bleachers would look like little more than toothpicks. It saw an appearance from arguably sport's greatest icon, as well as the one and only match between two of wrestling's most legendary figures, Ric Flair and Antonio Inoki. Despite how big the event is, it's something that's largely been forgotten. WWE, who now own the rights to the show, barely admit that it exists. It's one of the few big WCW shows that is not available on the WWE network, for example. Something about the biggest wrestling supercard of all time not being a WWE event doesn't exactly fit in with their general narrative. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Still, this show is very interesting for many, many reasons. As you might expect, the action in the ring is amongst the least of them. There are so many stories surrounding this show, from the total weirdness of it to the tales of how various wrestlers nearly fell foul of the North Korean government, of which there are plenty. Because, let's face it, it doesn't get any more stranger in a strange land than a group of largely American wrestlers in the world's most isolated country. So, perhaps it's time to look at this show and all that surrounded it. It should be fun. In terms of North Korea and wrestling, well, there's not much to say aside from one thing. There are perhaps two North Korean people who stand above everyone else in the history of sports entertainment and indeed, sports in general. One of them is Pak Do-ik, who in the 1966 World Cup scored a goal that sent NK to the second round of the tournament at the expense of Italy, arguably the greatest upset in the history of professional football. The second man was born before the split, although this hasn't stopped North Korea claiming him. Kim Sin-rak, born in 1924 in South Hamgyeon. Later moved to Japan and called himself Mitsuhiro Momota as a way of avoiding prejudice against Koreans, reaching Sekiwake rank in sumo. After sumo, he turned to professional wrestling using his sumo moniker, Rikidozan. Throughout the 1950s, in a dark period for Japan, Rikidozan built professional wrestling over there by defeating Americans and helping to restore national pride. His legendary matches with the likes of Lou Thesz, Freddie Blassie and The Destroyer were watched by millions and achieved the biggest ratings in the entire history of Japanese television. His untimely death by peritonitis resulting from a Yakuza stabbing in 1963 resulted in a period of national mourning. Pound for pound, there is arguably no more popular figure in wrestling history than Rikidozan. Revered as a god both in Japan and North Korea, where his original home is a national monument. Pro-Res in Japan is the house that Rikidozan built. Aside from that, well, there's not much to say about wrestling and North Korea until we get to this event in 1995, one that Rikidozan still has a connection to by way of the man who helped organise it, his most famous pupil, Antonio Inoki, the founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling. After the death of Rikidozan, his two best trainees, Inoki and Giant Baba, would carry Puro in Japan between them, and they continued to help build the house. Inoki is perhaps the only other wrestler who could conceivably match Rikidozan's popularity, again an almost godlike figure at points. He also famously fought Muhammad Ali in 1976 in a boxing versus pro wrestling match that remains one of the most watched mixed martial arts events of them all. And considering how deathly dull said match was, it's a wonder that it didn't kill MMA off completely then and there. But hey, Inoki probably only pays attention to the numbers. Anyway, Antonio Inoki was also successful as a politician. He was elected to the Diet in 1989, and his most famous action was to organise the release of several Japanese hostages in Iraq through negotiations with Saddam Hussein. This also involved putting on a wrestling show in Iraq, funnily enough. However, in 1994 his political career was scuppered almost totally by scandals, mainly embezzlement. Thanks to his association with Rikidozan, Inoki had been able to visit North Korea and even talk with high-ranking members of the Workers' Party basically as he pleased. And so, he largely organised what would become known officially as the Pyongyang International Sports and Culture Festival for Peace, as a means to try and save his battered reputation, an attempt to symbolically bring North Korea and Japan in the best way he knew how. For North Korea, it was an opportunity to show themselves to the outside world in pretty much the only way they knew how, through theatrics, illusion, and strange Stalinist ceremony. This is how North Korea operates in everything. In early 1995, Inoki gave then WCW president Eric Bischoff a phone call. Bischoff had a personal acquaintance with Muhammad Ali as part of Turner Broadcasting due to Ali's personal love for wrestling. Indeed, many of Ali's famous histrionics and charisma was built on watching wrestling as a youngster, in particular the legendary Gorgeous George. Inoki wanted Bischoff's help in convincing Ali to go to this event he was planning in Pyongyang, and then asked if he'd like to come along and bring a wrestler over for a match. Bischoff's thought can be respected. It was basically, go to Pyongyang? Shit yeah, let's do it. You can't fault his curiosity, really. Getting Ali involved was easy enough. He thought much the same way and was more than happy to go. Going to Pyongyang is not an opportunity that comes round often, after all. North Korea themselves had extra motivation to put on this event. In 1994, Kim Il-sung, otherwise known as the Great Leader, who had ruled the country since 1958, passed away, bringing his son Kim Jong-il into power. And so there was a lot of speculation about what direction the country was heading in on a global scale. Putting this event on was basically the country's way of making a point and pointing out that all was still good. You know, in their North Korean way, that meant actually nothing was good at all, with its citizens utterly impoverished and the country going through one of the worst famines in its entire history. But hey, 350,000 people! It should be noted that Ric Flair was not Inoki's first choice as an opponent. His first choice was Hulk Hogan. Inoki and Hogan had a long history as opponents dating back to the early 80s. Another lesser-cited fact is that the WWE did not initially make Hulk Hogan a superstar. He was a star in Japan first of all. He was iconic over there well before lifting the WWF title in 1984. And so, Inoki wanted Hogan. However, when Bischoff asked Hogan if he'd like to go to North Korea, Hogan's response was, well, as blunt and to the point as you would expect. Ric Flair was second choice, and his response was to go along with it. Now strangely, despite their status, Inoki and Flair had never met in the ring. When Flair wrestled in Japan, he usually did so under the banner of All Japan Pro Wrestling, and so he'd basically never met Inoki at all. This one-off match between two of the sport's greatest that would never happen again certainly makes this show a curiosity for fans, North Korea or not. Anyway, the stage was set. The following wrestlers would be on the show, or at least what we saw of it. Chris Benoit, Too Cold Scorpio, Scott Norton, the Steiner Brothers, and Road Warrior Hawk were all US wrestlers who were mostly working in New Japan at the time and would have been paid for the show through them. The only strictly WCW wrestler working this show was Ric Flair. Then you have the native New Japan contingent: Inoki, Yuji Nagata, Tokimitsu Ishizawa, later Kendo Kashin, Masa Chono, Hiro Saito, El Samurai, Tadao Yasuda, Shinya Hashimoto, Hiroshi Hase, and Kensuke Sasaki. There were also 4 Joshi wrestlers on the show from All Japan Women: Bull Nakano, Akira Hakuto, Manami Toyota, and Mariko Yoshida. Eric Bischoff also brought along his friend Sonny Ono as a consultant. In late April of 1995, they all would fly out to Pyongyang from Nagoya in Japan on a rickety old transport plane that had definitely seen service in the Korean War. Most of the in-flight entertainment was provided by Muhammad Ali. According to everyone, he was pretty fantastic to be around. Now, we often think of the older Ali as somewhat tragic due to his Parkinson's, but he was still as lucid as ever and perfectly articulate when conversing with people one-on-one. A man above nobody, he listened and laughed along with wrestlers' stories and generally made everyone forget that the plane that they were on rattled everywhere, didn't have any seatbelts, and had air pockets from which you could see the ground. A lot of the detail of the events surrounding the show come from a Sports Illustrated oral history of the event, featuring most everyone who was on the trip who are still alive. Bischoff, Flair, Scorpio, Scott Norton, all sorts. Pyongyang itself is a weird city. You see massive skyscrapers here and there, but then people say they're filled with nothing. The airport that the wrestlers came through in looked as though no one had used it in years. The roads are very wide in Pyongyang, which is apparently because fighter jets can take off from them if need be. And at no point were the wrestlers alone on their journey. At every stage, someone was accompanying them. Most of the wrestlers took a bus around North Korea for the journey, but the big stars such as Flair and Ali usually took a car, an apparently battered Mercedes that was laid on for the occasion. And of course, the first business was the official tour, including the memorial to Kim Il-sung, which still featured people on their knees, wailing and crying over the great leader a full year after his death. Again, it's all about performance. Much more interesting than the show itself are the 2 days of downtime that the wrestlers had before the show, in which a lot of stuff happened. You should absolutely read the SI article in full, which I'll link to in the description, so I won't go into masses of detail here as there's so much in there, from people working the fields in business suits, to all the showmanship that NK put on to show that they were the greatest country in the world, even if one look at the emaciated people would tell you how far from the truth that was. Still, there are events that should be put down here. One of the better events for the wrestlers on the trip was a visit to Rikidozan's home, which was marked by something quite heartwarming. You see, Ricky's home was up a long set of stairs, which all of a sudden Muhammad Ali, without warning, ran straight up like it was 1975 all over again. Like Rocky, only even better. Ali's people said to the wrestlers that this was not uncommon. In the moments when Ali wasn't feeling the Parkinson's, he would exercise. Again, he'd talk lucidly when in quiet conversation, but couldn't raise his voice. There was one other time during the trip when people might have wished he didn't raise his voice. Flair and Ali were invited to a special dinner at the presidential palace, during which a high-ranking NK official gave the party line that North Korea was the best country in the world and could destroy the US at any time they wished. Suddenly, Ali pops up and says, "No wonder we hate these motherfuckers." Flair apparently did not know where to look, nor did anyone else. Keep this in mind for later on. Ali being Ali, he could get away with this. Someone else on the trip wasn't so lucky. Eric Bischoff recalled one quite stunning sight. Early one morning, he decided to go for a run, as he normally did. First off, the Pyongyang streets were completely empty, and then all of a sudden, slowly at first but then with a blinding rush, the streets filled with everyone walking to work. Barely anyone drives in North Korea. It turned from nothingness to utterly packed. On returning to the hotel, Bischoff was told in no uncertain terms that he would not do that again and that he should stay in the hotel. One incident that a lot of people know about, of course, is the fight on the bus. This happened between Too Cold Scorpio and Hawk. There's differing accounts on this. According to Scorpio, the two started exchanging words big time, a racial slur happened, and the fight started. Hawk himself is dead, so doesn't have an account, but others on the bus say that Scorpio was bad-mouthing Ric Flair, who was riding in the car. Hawk, who considered Flair a mentor, spoke up in Ric's defence, the war of words started, and the fight broke out. In any case, this was kind of scary for everyone involved, especially seeing as the government had everybody's passports. Some wondered if they might just get taken off the bus and shot. Apparently nothing came of it. Maybe the agents just thought that the Americans were confirming all of their stereotypes about them? Who knows. But absolutely no one had it worse than Scott Norton. It's not even close. It's late night and Scott's in his hotel room. He pays an exorbitant cost to talk on the phone to his girlfriend and they get into a fight. Scott then says, "You have no idea what kind of shithole I'm in." Click. The phone cuts off. Minutes later, there's a loud knock on his door and an agent accusing Scott of bad-mouthing Korea. He is taken out of the hotel to somewhere, probably underground, and interrogated. It's some deep Ministry of Love type deal. This lasts about an hour, and Scott's wondering if this is it for him. Will he leave here alive? He's not Muhammad Ali. He can't get away with it. Finally, he is told to not say anything more bad about Korea and allowed to leave. On getting back to his room, he tries to call New Japan ref and official Tiger Hattori, but his phone has been cut off completely. God damn. Needless to say, this wasn't a pleasant trip. These are just a few major events, there's plenty more. Again, I highly recommend reading the SI article, it's absolutely cracking. Eventually though, we get to the day of the event. On the car ride there, Scott Steiner is in awe of the amount of people who are going. There's hundreds and thousands of them. He says that, hey, at least we've drawn a pretty big crowd. The driver asks what Scott means by draw, and Scott says that all these people have paid to see us. To which the driver says that all of these people have been forced to go. If they didn't go, they'd probably get a bullet in the neck. So yes, while this Supercard might be the biggest audience for any wrestling show, needless to say it's not the biggest paid attendance for a card, put mildly. Anyway, let's go to the event itself. As mentioned before, the Collision in Korea is not available on the network or anything like that. There exists two versions of the show, both of which cover some of the matches that occurred over the 2 days. One is a USA version shown on pay-per-view, which did not perform well at all, and the other is a Japanese VHS version. All of the matches are clipped, and the USA pay-per-view version features dubbed commentary from Bischoff, Mike Tenay, and Kazuo Ishikawa, who you likely know better as Sonny Ono. It also features a lot of added-on crowd noise. Why? Well, again, going on to the account of the show, for most of the matches the crowd was deathly quiet. If you're one of those who think that Japanese crowds are often quiet, well, they were nothing compared to this. It doesn't seem as though there's much reason for this beyond the people not knowing what exactly to make of this thing in front of them. They'd never seen pro wrestling before, ever. The show featured a hell of a lot of ceremony, which we'll also be seeing, and was more what they were used to, but wrestling itself was alien. Even when Muhammad Ali was introduced, it's not like the North Korean people really knew who he was. That's what the news is like there after all. The only person on the card who they likely knew at all was Inoki. There is also one match in particular that is completely alien to the Korean mentality as a whole, which they didn't know what to make of at all, and we'll cover that. But for now, let's do the old card rundown. We've got 8 matches to look at, and I'm going to focus on the American version. We start the show with perhaps the only time you'll ever see the flags of the US and the DPRK merged as one, before going to our commentators. Tenay asks Ishikawa to give us the political intrigue behind the event, which is rather funny in retrospect. Apparently this is wrestling diplomacy at its finest. No messing though as we get straight to the first match. As Scorpio runs down, Bischoff does explain that the Korean fans are polite and that it's been a long time since they've seen any pro wrestling, which is fair enough. There is a section of people around Lewin before you get to the bleachers. I'm guessing those would be government officials and the like? And just in case things couldn't get weirder, we've got a Benoit match as the opener. Scorp enters and already you get the feel of just how freaking huge this place is. It's really something. He does a spinneroonie into a tranquillo, and I'm guessing this match is going to be a hell of a lot better than his bout against Julio Fantastico at Heroes of Wrestling. Pegasus comes out and both wrestlers get some flowers while we get more on the general isolated nature of North Korea from our wrestling commentators. Now I'm not taking the piss or anything, it's just funny to hear this on a wrestling show. Let's be real, this is one of the largest diplomatic missions, I guess you could call it that, to North Korea ever, and it's a freaking wrestling show. Eric Bischoff is telling you about North Korea's inspirational marching music that they had in place of pop. We get underway and, damn, Benoit is cut. This is peak crippler right here, folks. The match itself is something of a technical exhibition, lots of ground-based mat work to start off with, the usual bridges, flips and roll-ups you'd expect. Scorpio does get something of an edge with a beautiful moonsault, followed by a super kick, but then misses a splash. Benoit hits a kitchen sink, followed by a suplex drape across the ropes. Benoit then tries to suplex Scorp back into the ring, but he reverses and hits another sidekick, which signals the finish. Scorpio attempts to go for a tombstone, but Benoit wiggles the legs and reverses the position, hitting a beautiful jump-in tombstone of his own. Up to the top, and a swan dive headbutt gets Benoit the win in 6:22. This was an okay match really. It never quite felt like they got out of second gear, but Benoit and Scorp did work well together. Not much else to say really. The crowd didn't seem to get much out of it. Up next, we have a match between two young New Japan guys. It's Tokimitsu Ichizawa versus Yuji Nagata. Not much missing here, we're basically straight into this one. One thing to note about the commentary for the show is that Bischoff is doing the play-by-play, and he isn't very good at it. Mike Tenay is used to add colour due to his extensive knowledge of global wrestling, and he is good at it. Kazuo Ishikawa, meanwhile, is kind of the heel commentator in that he roots for all the Japanese wrestlers over the Americans. It's a bit understated though, far from the histrionics he would later employ as Sonny Ono. Anyway, I don't know, this isn't all that much of a match. It's very mat-based, the sort of match that would absolutely die in front of an American audience. The main thing about this match is Bischoff's calling, especially when it comes to kicks. He went to the Randy Rosenblum school of calling kicks, I'm afraid. Every kick is a back leg front kick. Toe kick, back leg front kick. Roundhouse kick, back leg front kick. Side kick, back leg front kick. Enziguri, jumping back leg front kick. Spinning heel kick, jumping spinning back leg front kick. It's really quite annoying, seriously. And this guy apparently did karate too? Jesus. In the ring, the only good move is a nice capture suplex from Nagata after grabbing one of Ishizawa's back leg front kicks. Anyway, after a bunch of mat action, Nagata takes control with a few back leg front kicks of his own, knocks Ishizawa down and applies the crossface for the submission in 4:28. A very nothing match, utterly average. Before the next match, we get a brief interlude where we see some of the ceremonies that the DPRK put on inside the stadium. There's a lot of it, and all of it's very intricate. You get to see just how big the Mayday Stadium is here, and what's perhaps the most impressive thing, everyone in the audience had different coloured cards, and they create some quite intricate pictures on cue. We'll see more of that later. For now, we're back in the ring for a tag match against 4 more New Japan guys. Masahiro Chono and Hiro Saito will take on Tadao Yasuda and El Samurai. Chono and Saito are a pretty regular team, while Yasuda and Samurai are somewhat thrown together. Yasuda is a 1-year rookie who had a background in sumo, and El Samurai wrestles in the junior heavyweight division. The Chono and Saito team have the awesome WCW Rey Mysterio theme dubbed into their entrance. Now, I wouldn't say that this match is overtly terrible, but again, there's barely anything memorable about it. Masa Chono was one of the best workers around when he was younger, but even here he's moved towards a more brawling style. Saito is totally nondescript, and Yasuda? Good lord, he's terrible. His only offense is big boots and sumo slaps. He can't sell much either, really not good. El Samurai can at least bump well for the two big men, but I would honestly struggle to tell you anything about this match. As for the finish, Samurai does get a hope spot, but Chono halts it with a low blow. Saito rushes in and things get really messy, but eventually there's a hoe train in the corner, followed by an Irish whip into Chono's Yakuza kick. Chono then hits a flying shoulder tackle from the top for the 3 count in, again, a very average indeed 8:02. There's pretty much nothing at all to say about this. I forgot about it as soon as I finished watching it. We get another montage before the next match, this time of various sites around North Korea. We see Flair and Ali, a close-up of Inoki focused right on the people's chin, an old pagoda, the DPRK's version of the L'Arc de Triomphe, and Inoki walking with some flowers. I presume to lay them on the memorial to Kim Il-sung, which the wrestlers kinda had to do. So this next match should be really freaking good. This is the women's tag team match. 4 All Japan Women Joshi superstars, all of whom were absolutely among the world's best workers at the time. The talent in this win is quite frankly off the scale. This is also perhaps the match that the North Korean audience would have been most perplexed by. Think of how conservative their culture is. Hell, the passive role of women in Korean society isn't just a northern thing. This would have been something on the other side of the DMZ. Think of that, and then think of what this audience would make of someone like Bull Nakano, foot-high blue mohawk and all. Apparently they were somewhat stunned by this match. One immediate thing to note as we get underway, this match is only 30 seconds longer than the previous tag match, however it features about 30 times more action. This match is where business really picks up. After 3 somewhat basic matches where the wrestlers almost seemed to be intimidated by the surroundings and the alien nature of this show, the All Japan women just don't care and immediately go all out to steal it, which of course they do. We get a hot start as Nakano and Hokuto double team Yoshida, but Toyota thwarts them with a body press, and the action basically doesn't slow down from there. This is fantastic, so long as you can get past the commentary, which never seems to focus on anything except Nakano's appearance. Psychology isn't a big thing in this match, but awesome moves and bumps certainly are. There's so much it's hard to properly call, you just focus on the crisp double team action. Yoshida takes most of the punishment as Hokuto and Toyota respectively do a lot of flying, and Bull does power spots and submissions. She even does she calls that the page tap out at one point. We get a lot of cool dives to the outside, especially a fantastic somersault plancher from Hokuto. Toyota goes for the Japanese Ocean Cyclone suplex, but Hokuto reverses out. Yoshida does an amazing springboard crossbody on Nakano. Finally, after that aforementioned plancher from Hokuto, Yoshida is taken back to the ring, body slammed, and Nakano hits her finishing guillotine leg drop for the 3 in 8:34. An excellent match where all 4 wrestlers went up to 11 and got the crowd relatively cooking in the end to boot. This is absolutely the show stealer of Night 1. The next match is the main event of Night 1, Scott Flash Norton vs Shinya Hashimoto, with Hashimoto's IWGP Heavyweight Championship on the line. As Scott comes out, Bischoff says that he certainly had quite the time in North Korea and that they were probably glad to see the back of him, alluding to Norton's run-in with the government. Hashimoto, New Japan's champion and top face, comes out to the awesome WCW Dean Malenko theme. Norton, a legitimate arm wrestling champion who had a role in the Sly Stallone classic Over the Top, is 360 pounds of pure muscle. Hashimoto is 300 pounds of pure beef. He always looks fat, but this guy's a beast. The expectation here is for a stiff, burly brawl where 2 guys just beat the piss out of each other, and I'm excited. And, well, that's not what we get, to be honest. The pace for this one is kind of slow. Norton takes most of the offense, and there's quite a lot of rest holds. Not a lot of note really happens. The match does threaten to get exciting at points whenever there's a strike or a back leg front kick exchange, but it tends to cool down quickly after that. If you've watched enough wrestling, then you know pretty quickly what these 2 guys are working towards, and even if you don't, you'll know as soon as the commentary start talking about the 20-minute time limit just a couple of minutes in. As we get to the finishing stretch, we do see some decent moves. Norton kicks out of Hashimoto's finishing DDT, but in the end the bell just goes as they're running the ropes, feeling like the pair never even got to build up to a proper finish. And so it's a 20-minute time limit draw, and a very disappointing contest. Neither ever had much of an advantage, and they didn't ever even come close to kicking into top gear. Norton and Hashimoto did have matches that would live up to the billing of big guys taking lumps out of each other, but this wasn't one of them. Maybe their minds were somewhere else. It's understandable perhaps if they didn't really give a shit and just wanted to go home, especially in the case of Norton. There's another montage before the next match, which again features a ton of the ceremony that was on display. Lots of gymnastics and complicated routines, but I'm always impressed by the cards in the audience a lot more. It's kind of cool, but it's still that North Korea weirdness. They put so much into this because they think that's how you get over on the global stage, which might have worked back in the 1950s, not so much now. Anyway, we're into night 2. And of all the matches they could have picked, we get a second appearance from Tadao Yasuda. He's going to be up against Road Warrior Hawk. This card was to feature both Road Warriors, but Animal had to pull out due to injury, so we get Liss instead. And it doesn't take long. Yasuda does more of his poor sumo slap offense, but Hawk doesn't sell it much and quickly takes advantages with clotheslines and so forth. Yasuda then hits a butterfly suplex and Hawk pops straight up, total no-sell. A power slam follows, Hawk hits the flying clothesline off the top, fuck you very much, Tadao Yasuda is jobbed out by Hawk in 2:21. A bad match indeed, but mercifully a short one. Hawk ain't selling for nobody, not even in Pyongyang. Even if he were wrestling Kim Jong-il and booked to lose, he'd have probably popped right back up after the 3 count. We've got some tag team action up next, and hoo boy it's a doozy. The team of New Japan aces, Hiroshi Hase and Kensuke Sasaki, are going up against my favourite tag team of all time, Rick and Scott, the Steiner brothers. I love the Steiners. This match should be fan-frickin-tastic. In fact, these exact two teams already had one amazing tag bout together back in 1991. The Steiners were freelancing in various places at this time, both in New Japan and also in ECW. Hase and Sasaki were mainly singles guys, but had a lot of experience of tagging together. We start off with some technical exchanges between Hase and Scott, but it isn't long before the power comes into play. Scott throws Hase over the top, right onto one of his seconds. And almost from there it's full on Steiner mode. Up and circle, down and circle, left and square, and right and circle. Poor old Hase ends up taking a ton of the punishment, while Sasaki often provides the other team's offence. Generally the match is always interesting, but goddamn, this is peak Steiners throwing people around. Rick absolutely nails Hase to the cross with a sickening German suplex that lands poor Hiroshi onto the top of his head. This match is great. However, the commentary is at its absolute worst thanks to Bischoff, who can't stop going about how the Steiners might not have the strength as a team to compete in WCW. Now this beef presumably goes back to the Steiners jumping from WCW to WWF a couple of years previously. He says this while the Steiners are absolutely lording it over the opposition. As dominant as the Steiners are, this isn't a squash. Hase gets some hits of his own, including his signature Uranage and later on the Giant Swing. However, Rick comes up and hits a second sickening head drop German on Hase. Christ. Scott comes in and hits a pump handle slam, Sasaki breaks up the pin and brawls with Rick on the outside, which leaves Scott the opening he needs for perhaps the most dangerous wrestling move of them all. Scott primes Hase for the suplex inverted tombstone, aka the frickin' Steiner screwdriver, and then the camera cuts away from it. Heroes of Wrestling Vision mixing ahoy. Anyway, he hits it, and the Steiners win in 11:51. What a shitty thing to do. Considering that this is a taped show, I can't imagine that cutting away from the finish was anything but purposeful on WCW's part, presumably because of the Steiner beef. If we quickly go to the Japanese VHS version, we can see what the finish actually looked like. Anyway, this is a damn good match, as good as the women's tag. Someone might want to call Hiroshi Hase's family after this one though, cause he most certainly got Steinerized. We cut back to our commentators for their thoughts on predictions on the main event. Tenay stays neutral, and naturally Bischoff and Yamazaki predict a win for Flair and Inoki respectively. We get a quick montage of the two wrestlers getting ready for the bout. And so it's time for the last bout, the dream match, Ric Flair vs Antonio Inoki, two of the most popular wrestlers of them all going at it for the first and last time. To go through their accomplishments would take at least half an hour. This is a match between two undisputed legends. And of course, one of them was the man who helped put this all together. If the North Korean audience know one name from this whole card, then it's Antonio Inoki. Inoki was 53 at the time of this match, 7 years older than Flair, and didn't wrestle all that much. This was actually Flair's first match in several months after losing a retirement match against Hulk Hogan in October '94. We get some nice old school match stuff to start with, and both get the better of the other at points. It's lots of feeling out, occasional offense and playing to the crowd, very old school type stuff. Flair finally gets the upper hand with a hot shot and starts working Inoki down. Lots of the classic leg-based offense, from the shin breaker to the chop block, plenty of chops, and even an STF at one point. The crowd for this match are noticeably different, much hotter for this bout than any other we've seen. The signature offense continues with the knee drop and ultimately the figure 4, which Inoki manages to escape. Finally, Inoki gets back into the game with strikes, particularly his great 1-2 slaps and punches. The crowd gets into a frenzy as finally we get the Flair flop. More of the classic Flair spots follow, begging off, the Flair flip over the turnbuckle, and the failed top rope move. Inoki looks good, but Flair gets the better of another exchange, followed by an elbow and a backdrop for near falls. Flair goes for another body slam, but Inoki head scissors out of it and hits a fantastic rolling copper kick, followed by a knee drop off the top. Inoki picks Flair up and finally hits the signature Fighter Hayabusa back brain jumping back leg front kick, or Enzigiri for short, which is enough for the win at 14:52. After the match there's a big show of respect between the two combatants, and we get more ceremonial stuff from the Mayday Stadium to close out the broadcast. Now personally, I think this is a fantastic match. It's common for dream matches like this to disappoint, but it absolutely did not. It was all it should have been, really. It certainly wasn't a modern match by 1995 standards, but it was played out really well. And while Inoki was certainly very good in this match, this is absolutely the Ric Flair show. One of those matches where he was flawless in every regard and carried Inoki that extra mile to something great. Some may think of the typical Flair stuff as a bit too old-fashioned, samey and hokey, but it's all designed to make the whole match look brilliant. The Flair routines are fine-tuned and even-handed almost to the last detail. And this match shows how well it works. In the world's most isolated nation, in front of a crowd of 190,000 who knew nothing whatsoever about pro wrestling, Flair and Inoki got them responding. Hell, it felt like the Mayday Stadium was shaking as the match neared its end. Flair is absolutely one of the greats, and this is also one of the best Inoki matches too. Highly recommended. So how was the show overall? I guess it wasn't too bad a watch. There's definitely 3 matches that are worth a look on the show: the women's tag, Hase and Sasaki vs Steiners, and in particular, Flair vs Inoki. More than anything else, that one should be seen, as it's the only meeting between them, and as decent as the other 2 matches are, they've all had better meetings elsewhere. Everything else on the show is utterly missable, so you might be better off just watching Flair Inoki and not bothering with the rest of it. Still, I was able to watch the whole 2 hours in one sitting. It's kind of the equivalent to one of those old WWF UK house show pay-per-views, Capital Carnage, Insurrection or whatever, only in a massive stadium in an isolated communist country, and with a massive dream match tacked on to the end of it. One big thing certainly brings the US pay-per-view version of the show down, and that is the production as a whole. It's very lazily done. The WCW commentary was simply dubbed over the top of the Japanese broadcast, and the original Japanese commentary wasn't even removed, making a fair bit of the commentary very muddled indeed. And the commentary itself is really bad. Eric Bischoff is quite simply a miserable announcer and tends to ruin a lot of the matches, especially the Steiners. Yamazaki barely speaks above a whisper, and even Tenay doesn't get much of a chance to contribute. So yeah, that certainly knocks points off the show. If you can tune it out, then the show's a bit more worth watching, but on the whole this was a pretty poor show from WCW, and the generally poor technical quality of the card is perhaps another reason why it can't be found on WWE Network. There is also a Japanese VHS version of the show, which certainly offers an alternative. It is quite different. It's kind of presented like a verite documentary, meaning you get a lot more footage from the country itself, as well as thoughts from the wrestlers at points, although you'll obviously need to understand Japanese to appreciate that. There's also a whole load more ceremony and the like. The matches themselves are often heavily cut and there is no commentary, but you do get to see action from the other matches from the 2 nights. This includes matches such as a fine singles bout between Chris Benoit and Hiroshi Hase, an even finer one between Akira Hokuto and Bull Nakano, and the big misfire of the event. Shinjiro Otani suffered a legitimate injury in a match with Too Cold Scorpio, and the bout had to be stopped. This is perhaps only worth a watch if you're interested in seeing a bit more of the show, but at least you don't have to contend with Eric Bischoff on this version. So there it is, the Collision in Korea. One of the biggest trips ever to the DPRK, and it was a frickin' wrestling show. Who says that pro-graps can't bring people together, eh? Yeah, obviously that's kind of a silly statement in many ways. It was a pretty awkward 5 days, and by the end of it everyone wanted to go the hell home. Ric Flair was asked to read a statement saying that North Korea were the best nation in the world and other things along those lines, but pretty much refused and read a more generic set of platitudes instead. They all took the same rickety old transporter plane back to Japan, at which point Flair kissed the ground, said, "I love Japan," and told everyone that they were going out tonight. And if you know Ric Flair, you know what that means. How much did this excursion to North Korea affect the world in the grand scheme of things? It didn't affect anything, really. It did generate a few news stories from Reuters and the like in America, but they were all just about totally negative. Other than that, nobody really cared about the trip. It seems as though a few US officials might have asked some questions and they certainly didn't approve of it, but no one got punished. Rocky IV this was not. The event did absolutely nothing to help Antonio Inoki's reputation, and he lost his seat in the Japanese Diet. The pay-per-view itself, when shown in August, did a pretty minuscule 0.15 buy rate by WCW standards, which is one of their lowest ever marks. Things in North Korea, I guess they kind of just went on as usual, theatrics on the world stage masking an utterly destitute people. Certainly, almost none of the wrestlers, or basically anyone at all, had good memories of the trip. When questioned about it for the oral history mentioned previously, the consensus was that everyone would rather eat their scrotums than go to North Korea ever again. Ric Flair is friends with Dennis Rodman, and whenever Rodman invites Flair to go on one of his trips to the country, he tells him that he must be utterly bonkers. But there are at least two wrestlers who did get something out of it, those being Akira Hokuto and Kensuke Sasaki. They met for the first time on this trip, fell in love immediately, and married mere months later, becoming the great glamour couple of Puro. They're still together, and it all started in North Korea. It seems rather doubtful that an event on such a grand scale like this will be repeated again. Inoki actually did put on another wrestling show in North Korea a few years back now, but it was a much smaller affair. Perhaps the whole thing didn't really mean much at all. I mean, there's nothing like a festival for peace when it comes to trying to save your reputation, after all. And just through watching this, you certainly won't actually learn much more about North Korea than whatever you had going in. Still, the stories behind the scenes are something else, and that's definitely worth looking into. Bye for now.